The smell of fresh coffee fills the air as customers line up for their daily fix. Behind the counter stands Mike Thompson, a disabled Marine veteran, skillfully making drinks despite his prosthetic leg. The atmosphere suddenly shifts when an angry customer storms in, demanding immediate service. The tension rises as the customer spots Mike's prosthetic leg and starts making loud, cruel remarks about disabled people serving food. Other customers shift uncomfortably, but no one steps forward. Mike maintains his composure, though his hands tremble slightly as he continues working. Then, through the glass door walks a familiar figure. Keanu Reeves, dressed casually in a black jacket. He pauses, taking in the scene before him. The customer's voice grows louder, more aggressive. Keanu's expression changes, his eyes fixed on the unfolding situation. What happens next will spark a chain of events that transforms not just one life, but an entire community. This is a story of how a single act of kindness can ripple out and touch countless lives. The scene fades to black as the sound of the coffee shop door chimes once more. The summer sun beat down on the busy streets of Los Angeles, casting long shadows across the entrance of the Morning Grind coffee shop. The small storefront, tucked between a bookstore and a boutique, had been serving the neighborhood for over 2 decades. Inside, the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans mingled with the sweet scent of pastries warming in the display case. Behind the counter stood Mike Thompson, his crisp brown apron neatly pressed, name tag gleaming under the pendant lights. At 32, Mike carried himself with quiet dignity. His Marine Corps training showed in his perfect posture and attention to detail, even as he navigated the tight space behind the counter with his prosthetic leg. 3 years ago, an IED in Afghanistan had taken his left leg below the knee, but it hadn't taken his spirit. The morning grind had given him a chance when many others wouldn't, and he'd worked his way up from dishwasher to lead barista through sheer determination. The morning rush was just beginning, a steady stream of regulars filing in for their daily caffeine fix. Mike knew most of them by name and order. Lily's oat milk latte with an extra shot, Tom's black coffee with room for cream, Maria's chai tea with honey. He moved with practiced efficiency, his prosthetic leg now as familiar to him as his own hands. The regulars had long stopped noticing his disability, seeing only his warm smile and perfectly crafted drinks. But not everyone was a regular, and sometimes new customers brought their prejudices through the door with them. The morning crowd had thinned when the glass door swung open with unusual force. A man in an expensive suit strode in, phone pressed to his ear, talking loudly about some business deal. His presence immediately changed the peaceful atmosphere of the coffee shop. Without ending his call or acknowledging Mike, he stepped to the front of the line, cutting in front of an elderly woman who had been waiting patiently. Mike cleared his throat politely. "Sir, there's a line. I'll be happy to help you as soon as I finish serving these customers first." The man lowered his phone, his face reddening with anger. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded, his voice rising. "I don't have time to wait behind these people. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. As Mike stepped sideways to continue making drinks for waiting customers, his prosthetic leg came into view. The man's eyes narrowed, fixing on it with obvious disgust. "What's this?" he sneered, ending his call. "They're letting cripples handle food now? That can't be sanitary. I want to speak to your manager." The coffee shop fell silent. Other customers shifted uncomfortably, some pulling out their phones to record the scene, others averting their eyes. The elderly woman Mike had been serving placed a gentle hand on his arm, but he gave her a reassuring smile. His Marine training had taught him how to handle hostile situations with grace. "Sir," Mike replied, his voice steady despite the slight tremor in his hands, "I assure you everything here meets health code requirements. I'd be happy to show you my food handler certification. Now, if you'd please return to the line, I'll serve you as soon as possible." The man's face grew redder. "You don't get to tell me what to do," he spat. "I pay good money here, and I deserve better than being served by some broken-down veteran who couldn't hack it in the real military." He slapped his hand on the counter, causing several customers to jump. "Get me your manager right now." Lily, a regular customer waiting for her latte, stepped forward. "Hey, leave him alone. Mike's the best barista in this place." But the man rounded on her. "Stay out of this. This is between me and the gimp who thinks he can work in food service." Mike's jaw tightened, but his voice remained professional. Years of military discipline and post-injury rehabilitation had taught him to control his emotions. Even when faced with such blatant discrimination, he continued making drinks, though his movements were slightly less fluid than usual, betraying his inner turmoil. The man, growing more agitated by Mike's composed response, raised his voice even louder. "Hello? Is anyone in charge here actually listening? You can't seriously tell me this is acceptable. What kind of establishment are you running?" Other customers had begun recording the scene on their phones, their expressions a mix of shock and anger at the man's behavior. The morning silence had been replaced by tense whispers and the occasional gasp at particularly cruel comments. The situation was reaching a boiling point, with Mike caught in the center of an increasingly hostile environment. Just then, the glass door chimed again. The sound cut through the tension like a knife, drawing all eyes toward the entrance. There, silhouetted against the morning sun, stood a familiar figure that would change everything. The bell above the door chimed as Keanu Reeves stepped into the morning grind, dressed casually in a black jacket and jeans. His presence wasn't immediately noticed, as most people remained focused on the confrontation at the counter. He paused just inside the entrance, taking in the scene before him with the careful observation that had made him famous for his thoughtful nature both on and off screen. The angry customer continued his tirade, unaware of the new arrival. Keanu moved quietly to the back of the line, his expression growing more concerned as he listened to the stream of discriminatory remarks. He noticed the phones recording the scene, the uncomfortable shifting of other customers, and most importantly, the dignified way Mike handled himself despite the abuse. Every muscle in Keanu's body tensed as he watched Mike struggle to maintain his composure. Having worked with veterans organizations for years, he recognized the telltale signs of someone fighting to keep their military discipline in the face of civilian cruelty. The slight tremor in Mike's hands, the rigid set of his shoulders, the carefully measured breathing, all spoke of inner turmoil masked by professional restraint. The hostile customer, growing even more aggressive, slammed his hand on the counter again. "I said get me your manager, or are you too stupid to understand simple English?" The words echoed through the now silent coffee shop, hanging in the air like smoke. Keanu stepped forward, his movement drawing attention from nearby customers who began whispering in recognition. His face showed no trace of his usual easygoing smile. Instead, his eyes held a quiet intensity that commanded attention. He'd seen enough. The man who had once played John Wick was about to demonstrate that his real-life commitment to defending others was just as strong as any character he'd portrayed on screen. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows cast a shadow long across the floor as he moved toward the counter. Each step was deliberate, measured, purposeful. The whispers grew louder as more people recognized him, creating a wave of murmurs that finally caught the attention of the angry customer, who turned just as Keanu reached the front of the shop. The coffee shop fell silent as Keanu Reeves positioned himself between Mike and the hostile customer. Standing at his full height, Keanu's presence commanded the space without a word being spoken. The angry customer's face cycled through emotions, confusion, recognition, and finally, an attempt to maintain his aggressive stance despite the unexpected intervention. "I couldn't help but overhear," Keanu began, his voice carrying that distinctive calm that had made him famous. "You seem to have a problem with this man serving you coffee." His words were measured, each one carefully chosen. "I'd like to understand why." The customer, caught off guard but still trying to maintain his position, straightened his expensive suit jacket. "This isn't about you. This is about proper standards in food service. Surely you understand that someone with his condition shouldn't be handling food." Keanu's expression hardened slightly, though his voice remained level. His condition? You mean being a veteran who sacrificed part of himself serving our country? That condition? He gestured toward Mike, who stood watching the exchange with quiet dignity. Do you know what it takes to earn those sacrifices? To continue showing up every day, despite people like you? The customer's face reddened further, but before he could respond, Keanu continued. I've worked with veterans for years, men and women who've given everything for people they've never met, including you. And here you are, throwing a tantrum over a cup of coffee. Several customers had moved closer, phones still recording. The morning sun streaming through the windows cast dramatic shadows across the scene, highlighting the contrast between Keanu's composed presence and the customer's increasing discomfort. Look, the customer attempted to backtrack, his voice losing its earlier confidence. I just want my coffee from someone more suitable. It's my right as a customer. Keanu shook his head slowly. You're right. Let me tell you about rights. Mike here had the right to come home to respect and gratitude. Instead, he's dealing with prejudice from people who've never had to sacrifice anything more significant than their morning coffee schedule. He turned to face the other customers, his voice rising slightly to address the whole shop. Every person in this room has a choice. We can be part of the problem, standing silent while people like Mike face discrimination, or we can stand up and say enough. The hostile customer, now visibly shrinking under the combined weight of Keanu's words and the disapproving stares of other patrons, attempted one final defense. I didn't mean to. I just thought. You thought wrong. Keanu interrupted firmly. Now, you have two options. You can apologize to Mike, get back in line, and treat him with the respect he's earned, or you can leave. Either way, this harassment stops now. The coffee shop held its collective breath. The customer looked around, finding no allies among the watching crowd. His shoulders slumped slightly as the fight drained from his posture. I apologize, he muttered, barely audible. Like you mean it, Keanu insisted, his tone brooking no argument. The customer turned to Mike, who had maintained his professional composure throughout the entire exchange. I'm sorry for my behavior, he said, clear this time. It was inappropriate and disrespectful. Mike nodded, accepting the apology with more grace than many thought the customer deserved. Thank you, sir. Would you like to place an order? The customer shook his head, turning quickly to leave the shop. The bell chimed as the door closed behind him, and for a moment silence held. Then, spontaneous applause broke out among the customers, their relief and approval filling the space that tension had occupied moments before. Keanu turned to Mike, his stern expression melting into something warmer. You handled that with incredible professionalism, he said, extending his hand. I'm Keanu. Mike shook his hand firmly. Mike Thompson, sir. And thank you. Not everyone would have stepped in like that. Sometimes all it takes is one person standing up to change the whole situation, Keanu replied, glancing around at the other customers who now looked somewhat ashamed for their earlier inaction. How about that coffee? As the morning rush subsided, Keanu stayed behind, sitting at a quiet corner table while Mike finished serving the remaining customers. The actor's presence had transformed the atmosphere of the coffee shop into something warmer, more communal. Customers who had previously kept to themselves now chatted with each other, discussing what they'd witnessed and sharing their own stories about veterans in their lives. When the last customer had been served, Keanu motioned Mike over to his table. Take a break, he said, pulling out a chair. I'd like to hear your story. Mike glanced at the clock, then nodded, untying his apron and settling into the offered seat. Afghanistan? Keanu asked quietly, noticing the Marine Corps pin on Mike's collar. Mike nodded, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee he'd made for himself. Third tour, he explained. IED took my leg below the knee. I was lucky. Some of my buddies didn't make it back at all. Keanu listened intently as Mike shared more about his service, his rehabilitation, and the struggles of returning to civilian life. The story emerged slowly, punctuated by long pauses and the occasional distant look in Mike's eyes. He spoke about the difficulty finding work, about employers who saw only his disability, not his capabilities. The morning grind was different, Mike said, gesturing around the coffee shop. They gave me a chance when nobody else would. Started as a dishwasher, learned everything I could, but... He hesitated, looking down at his coffee. But it's not your dream, Keanu finished softly. Mike's slight smile confirmed the observation. I always wanted to open my own place, Mike admitted. Not just a coffee shop, a gathering spot for vets. Somewhere they could find community, support, maybe even job training. But with medical bills and living expenses, he shrugged, leaving the sentence unfinished. Keanu was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he pulled out his phone, made a quick call. Tell me more about this dream of yours, he said after hanging up. In detail. What would you need to make it happen? For the next hour, they talked specifics, location costs, equipment, staffing, training programs. Mike's eyes lit up as he described his vision, showing Keanu rough sketches he'd made during slow periods at work. The actor took notes, asked questions, made suggestions. Finally, Keanu sat back. I have some connections in both the restaurant industry and veterans organizations, he said, and I've been looking for a meaningful project to support. What if we made this happen? Mike stared at him, uncomprehending. What do you mean? I mean, let's build your dream. My foundation can provide initial funding, and I know people who can help with the business side. You'd be in charge. It's your vision. We just help make it reality. Mike's hands trembled slightly as he processed the offer. But why? You don't even know me. Keanu leaned forward, his expression earnest. Because what happened this morning, that shouldn't happen to anyone, especially not someone who served their country. But you handled it with grace and dignity. You've got the right spirit for this kind of project. Sometimes people just need someone to believe in them. Tears welled in Mike's eyes as the reality of the opportunity sank in. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Keanu smiled. My lawyer will be here in an hour with preliminary paperwork. We can start working on this right away. Mike wiped his eyes, straightening his shoulders with new purpose. Yes, he said firmly. Absolutely yes. The transformation was visible. In his posture, his expression, the new light in his eyes. In the span of a few hours, he'd gone from being the target of discrimination to someone on the verge of realizing a long-held dream. And it had all started because one person chose to step up and make a difference. News of what happened at the morning grind spread rapidly through social media. The videos customers had recorded went viral, showing both the confrontation and Keanu's intervention. But it was what happened next that truly captured people's imagination. 6 months after that morning, Mike's dream became reality. Veterans Brew opened its doors in a renovated warehouse space just outside downtown Los Angeles. The coffee shop occupied the front, with a training center and community space in the back. The interior featured comfortable seating areas where veterans could gather, share stories, and find support among those who understood their experiences. Keanu's involvement didn't stop with the initial funding. He became a regular visitor, often spending hours talking with veterans who came through the doors. His presence drew attention to the project, but it was the mission that kept people coming back. The coffee shop began offering barista training programs specifically designed for disabled veterans, working around their unique challenges and helping them develop marketable skills. Other businesses took notice. A local restaurant chain reached out, offering to hire graduates of the barista program. Then a hotel group followed suit. Soon, Veterans Brew had a waiting list of employers eager to hire their trainees. The success stories multiplied. A former Army medic with PTSD found purpose again managing the morning shift. A wheelchair-bound veteran discovered she could master the espresso machine with some creative adaptations. Mike's original vision expanded. The community space hosted support groups, job fairs, and professional development workshops. Veterans helping veterans became the core philosophy, creating a network of support that stretched far beyond coffee and job training. The impact rippled further. Other cities reached out, wanting to replicate the model. Keanu's foundation helped establish similar programs in Chicago, Atlanta, and Seattle. Each location maintained the same principle, creating not just jobs but community. The angry customer from that morning eventually returned, this time to apologize properly. He became an unexpected ally, using his business connections to create more opportunities for veteran employment. His transformation became part of the story, proof that people could change when confronted with their own prejudices. Most importantly, Veterans Brew became known as a place where everyone was welcome, but discrimination was not. The incident that sparked its creation had transformed into a powerful message about respect, opportunity, and the difference one person's actions could make. 1 year after that fateful morning at the morning grind, Mike Thompson stood behind a different counter, watching his dream thrive around him. Veterans Brew had become more than just a coffee shop. It was a beacon of hope, showing what could happen when kindness confronts prejudice head-on. The numbers told part of the story. Over 200 veterans trained, 85% employment rate for graduates, and 5 new locations across the country. But the real impact showed in the smaller moments. The veteran who finally smiled again after months of isolation, the amputee who discovered they could still build a career, the community that formed around cups of coffee and shared experiences. Keanu Reeves remained involved, quietly supporting the project without seeking attention. His initial act of standing up for one veteran had multiplied, creating ripples that continued to spread. The foundation he helped establish ensured that Veterans Brew would continue changing lives for years to come. Mike often thought back to that summer morning when everything changed. The angry customer who tried to humiliate him had inadvertently sparked a movement. Now, instead of hiding his prosthetic leg, Mike displayed it proudly, showing other disabled veterans that their perceived limitations didn't define their potential. As he served another cup of coffee, Mike caught sight of his reflection in the polished espresso machine. The man looking back at him stood tall, confident, and proud, living proof that sometimes the worst moments in life could lead to the best transformations.